Hello, neighbor. You might not really be my neighbor, but aren't we all neighbors to one another? My name is Miss Eng. I'm from the Shaler North Hills Library, and tonight I want to read you a story about a man named Mr. Rogers. Now, a lot of you may not know who Mr. Rogers was. You might know who Daniel Tiger is, because he's still around and on TV, but Mr. Rogers was the guy who started the whole Mr. Rogers neighborhood, and Daniel Tiger is a member of that neighborhood. And when I was a kid, Mr. Rogers himself was on the show, and it was his show, and it was pretty cool. So maybe your super special grown-up or your super special grown-up grandparents might know who Mr. Rogers was, and you might know who he is too. But I hope you will learn about who he was, because he started some really cool stuff. And actually, Mr. Rogers and I went to the same school. We both went to Pittsburgh Seminary, not at the same time, but one time we were in class, we were in church history, and somebody came running up the steps and was like, "Mr. Rogers is downstairs!" And there we were like all excited, and we were all pretty old. I mean, I was the youngest one in seminary, and I was 22, and mostly everybody was a good like 15 or 20 years older than I am, with the exception of like a couple other people. So here we are, like all these adults running downstairs to meet Mr. Rogers in the flesh. And I know some people who actually like really knew him as a person, and if you watch him, he was super kind, like on TV, and they say he was really like that in real life too. So that's pretty cool. Hello, Neighbor, The Kind and Caring World of Mr. Rogers by Caldecott medalist Matthew Cordell. He was from Pittsburgh, which you'll find out if you don't already know. And this is a quote from Mr. Rogers. He also was a really great pianist. "It is our insides that make us who we are, that allow us to dream and wonder and feel for others. That's what's essential. That's what will always make the biggest difference in our world." Fred Rogers. And that's the thing, man, because it's what's inside us that makes the biggest difference. Welcome to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. As you can see, this is no ordinary neighborhood. It's the set for a television program, a children's television program that's connected with countless families since it was first broadcast in 1968. There were many things that made it different from your neighborhood. There were actors, camera operators, musicians, stage sets, and puppets. It took a great deal of work and love to bring the Mr. Rogers neighborhood to life each day. And it was all started by a man named Fred McFeely Rogers. Growing up near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Fred had many interests. He especially loved playing with puppets and music. He learned to play the piano at the age of 5. Fred playing his first piano, Fred's grandfather McFeely always said, "Freddie, you made this a special day just by being you." Fred playing with his baby sister Elaine, Fred playing the piano grandmother McFeely bought him when he was just 9 years old. Fred's family was proud of his talent and encouraged him to study music and composition as he got older. Fred was shy and often lonely. He was sometimes bullied, but whimsy and imagination were helpful to him, and so was his faith. After college, he planned to become a minister, and years later, he did become a special kind of minister. But at this moment in his life, something unexpected happened. In those days, television was new and just beginning to become popular, and Fred didn't like what he saw. I saw people throwing pies in each other's faces and all kinds of demeaning behavior, and I thought, why is it being used in this way? This could be a wonderful tool for education. And so I thought, and I said to my parents, I think maybe I'll go into television. So he went to work for the National Broadcasting Company, NBC, in New York City to learn how television programs are made. At first, Fred simply ran errands and fetched things that needed around the studio. and he learned a great deal. Best of all, he learned that connecting with younger viewers through children's television was what he loved the most. Fred moved back to Pittsburgh and began working on a television program for children. He continued to stay behind the scenes, but he took a more creative role. Drawing from his first background in music, he wrote songs and created characters, returning to his childhood love of puppetry. As an adult, Fred remembered the wonder of childhood as well as the fears. He spent a lot of time studying and learning about children and about their needs and feelings. And in time, it became obvious to him that too much of children's television was no more than silly and flashy entertainment. Fred had a new mission: to create a very different kind of children's television program that spoke to an audience with respect and understanding. A program where Fred would perform as never before in front of the camera and speak directly to his audience. And he would simply be his honest self, curious and playful, attentive and compassionate. The greatest gift you can give is your honest self. On February 19th, 1968, Fred became a permanent resident of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood when it premiered nationally on public television. And now, welcome back to the neighborhood. Fred began every episode by singing his welcoming song and changing into his comfortable cardigan sweater and sneakers. Let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Then a new idea, person or place would be introduced. Just like in life, there were good times in the neighborhood, like visiting a circus or a neighborhood school. But then there were difficult times too, like saying goodbye to a beloved pet. Fred understood that children have many feelings and interests, and all of them are worth mentioning and exploring. Mr. Rogers had many regular visitors, like Mr. McFeely, a friend who brought deliveries and discoveries, and Joe Negri, who owned a nearby music store. There was like Mr. McFeely, there was Betty Aberlin, there was Francois Clemens, and Audrey Roth, and Chef Brockett, and Maggie Stewart, and Chuck Aber, Neighbor Aber, and Joe Negri, and Bob Trow, and Elise Neal. Welcoming and accepting others and their differences was of great importance in the neighborhood. Fred made sure to include a diverse range of actors performing important roles. Police Officer Clemens was the first African-American character to appear in a recurring role on children's television series. Fred realized that children were naturally curious about the world around them. So, as Mr. Rogers, he often took us out of his home to meet new people and discover new places. We found out how people make things, how workers do their jobs. He went to a crayon factory, to a toy ball factory, sneaker factory, trumpet factory. We even met famous artists in the neighborhood, like Eric Carle, Yo-Yo Ma, and Margaret Hamilton. Yo-Yo Ma, he was a violinist dude, maybe a cellist, I'm not sure. He still is. Eric Carle wrote The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Margaret Hamilton, she played the witch in The Wizard of Oz, the one with the green face. Each day in the neighborhood, we spent time pretending when Trolley took us from Fred's television house to the neighborhood of make-believe. And this was like one of my favorite parts. I did love it all though. Here in the neighborhood of make-believe, an ensemble cast of puppets and people acted out a story about the subject introduced at the beginning of each episode. There was Cornflake Especially, King Friday the 13th, Queen Sarah Saturday. Oh, dude, it was so... Grand Pierre! Okay, when Mr. Rogers visited school, the neighborhood of make-believe built a school. When we saw how people made crayons in the real neighborhood, the neighborhood of make-believe held a coloring contest. So it like all went together. Fred loved the expressive and connective nature of playing and listening to music. so lots of music was played throughout the neighborhood. A jazz trio played the background music throughout the program, and of course, each day in the neighborhood, Fred sang the songs he composed, Johnny Costa Trio. And throughout his career, Fred wrote hundreds of songs about the important things children feel and learn as they grow, like many ways to say I love you, and what do you do with the mad that you feel, and it's you I like, every part of you, your skin, your eyes, your feelings, whether old or new, it's you I like. Every visit to the neighborhood would end as it began. Mr. Rogers changed back into his jacket and dress shoes while singing the song of love and reassurance to let us know that he would be back next time. It's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside. It's such a good feeling, a very good feeling. The feeling you know that I'll be back when the day is new. Anyway, Fred played many roles in the making of more than 900 episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He wrote the scripts. He was songwriter and singer, performer and puppeteer. He oversaw and approved what went on in every episode. Beyond his contributions, he truly loved working with others. He respected and appreciated the talents and artistry of all who were involved in the creation of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And because of this, everyone felt connected in a very sincere and personal way. Just like a real neighborhood. Just like yours. And my friends, that is a story about Mr. Rogers. And as I was reading that, I was thinking about the silly shows that Miss Rebecca and I put on. And they're nowhere near television quality. But I will say that the one thing that they have in common with what Mr. Rogers' shows were like is that we sincerely love you. And we sincerely love being able to be silly for you. And we know most of it's just flashy and exciting, extravagant entertainment. But we hope that if you learn anything from any of it, that you do learn that you are very special and that you are important just by being who you are, and that you don't need to change anything because you're great. Can you kiss your beautiful brains? Can you kiss your loving hearts? And look in that mirror. Look in that mirror and say, hey, good looking, because you're all good looking, just the way you are. Thank you, my friends. See you tomorrow. Dance party and the magic ape.